Hello everyone, it's Silver. This is Europa. So basically I kind of inadvertently started a theme of looking at occasionally these really chill exploration heavy games when I covered Caravan Sandwich back a little while ago. And because, you know, I play a lot of like hardcore RPGs and stuff on this channel, and sometimes it's nice to just have something that's really zen and chill to break things up, and that's exactly what we've got here. Europa is a sort of puzzle platformer in a sense that is very light on gameplay mechanics, but it does have them, and there's even some danger and stuff at certain points as well, so it's not just a purely exploration experience, but that is very clearly its main focus. And you can probably tell that the first thing to talk about is how it looks, because it looks very Studio Ghibli inspired, and that is deliberate. They cite that as something that they actually wanted to do, and in my opinion they succeeded. The world and the characters are very Ghibli-esque. It's got that sort of mix of cute and tragic in terms of its environments and its characters and stuff, and it is just a really good-looking game in general. I think the Studio Ghibli-esque art style is best when you're looking at like ancient natural decrepitude, you know, like very old overgrown ruins or robots resting in a field that are like overgrown with ivy and stuff and all rusted out. Little things like that, stuff that's more about like large environments, sweeping plains and big caves and all that stuff, but with some sort of natural age to them, some stuff that looks and feels ancient. This art design, this direction is really good at highlighting those things, and that's clearly what they've used it for here. They've done a very good job of making these big sweeping natural areas with some touches of ancient technology and stuff in them to give them a little bit of extra character. In terms of how it sounds, we have a very simple soundscape here, I'm pretty sure deliberately so, where most of what you're hearing are ambient environmental sounds. Well, lots of wind and water flowing and birds in the sky, or at least robo-birds and some other things. There's a good amount of nature sounds. Basically, this is like nature sounds, the game. There's a lot of that going on in the background, but there is some music. A lot of the music is sort of strings and wind instruments and stuff that kind of come in and out of the actual ambient wind sounds of the game. So you're getting this music that is sometimes hard to tell if it is just environmental sound or if it is actually music. It's subtle enough that it kind of blends back and forth. But although that's most of what you're going to hear in very contemplative, quiet environmental music, there is some more action-y, faster-paced stuff that you're going to hear in certain areas. There are the big vistas that are revealed to you, usually with some grand, sweeping orchestral music, and then there are also some more action-y bits where you're in danger or where you're transferring from place to place by flying around, and some, you know, just faster-paced stuff like that, where the music will speed up and be a lot more obvious and less ambient. So it's a lovely soundscape, really. It sounds great and it looks great, and I think most importantly, it sounds like it looks, if you get what I mean. The soundscape matches this cute Ghibli-esque art style, and they complement each other quite well, I think. As for mechanics, you are looking at a pretty mechanically simple game, as you would most likely expect. This is mostly about exploration, so you've got to jump, you can charge your jump to jump higher, you've got to glide, and you've got this sort of orb that you can pulse out of you that will just, it's sort of like a use button. Basically it activates whatever things the orb touches, and most of the game's mechanics are centered around light puzzle solving, exploring around these old ruins and things, and finding some logs that will tell you more of the story, and then progressing to the next area. And the game is split into these big open areas, so it is a very linear game. It's not open world, but the areas themselves are quite large and lend themselves to a fair amount of exploration, and there are optional things to find. For one, there are the journal pages that will allow you to understand more of the story. Many of these are in obvious areas that you'll see just by progressing, but some of them are in out-of-the-way areas that you've got to do some platforming and stuff to reach. You'll also find these emeralds, which will unlock something at the end of the game, no spoilers, and there are several of them to find, 50 I believe, many of which are in some out-of-the-way areas. Basically, if you're doing a lot of exploring, if you're looking through every crack of every brick in the world, then you'll find them. But more than anything, the game is about delivering its story to you in an interactable form. This is almost more like a picture book or a storybook that you play. I would say the game that's most similar to this would probably be Journey. It is definitely in that kind of mold. And as you're exploring through the world, you will actually find some adversity. It's not just about pressing forward and jumping. Sometimes there are some hazards and stuff. There are some enemies that can actually chase you around, as well as some turrets that can shoot at you. So you've got to worry about those things when you come across them, which does add a little bit of extra challenge. This is not a hard game, but it is clearly not trying to be. Even though I personally prefer puzzle games that have much more difficult puzzles, I don't mind when a puzzle game has easy ones as long as that's what it was going for, and in this case it is. So you'll sometimes be hitting switches or finding these hidden cubes to activate to open doors. Maybe you'll have to roll a ball into a socket, or maybe even find multiple balls around the environment and roll them all together. Sometimes you'll find these wisps out in the environment that you got to do a lot of platforming to get, and then bring the wisps to a switch to open the next door. The things like that, there are mechanics that you have to interact with, but they're all relatively simple. Sometimes you've even got to do things like interacting with these big light bridges and finding these big gliding sort of wind tunnels that take you all around the place, which allows for some really good vistas and some really screenshotable environments. I'd say this game is kind of meant for screenshots almost in terms of how it looks. It's just a very pretty game. You'll also find sometimes these white crystal thingies, these stars around the place, and these will allow you to hold more jetpack fuel, because you do actually have a sort of jetpack that allows you to do the gliding, but it also allows you to boost yourself off of the ground a certain height and stuff like that. And later on in the game, there will be lots of areas that you're meant to jetpack through them basically without touching the ground, because as long as you hit these blue spheres, you will refill your energy, and you can just keep gliding between each of them and jetpacking around. And also, when you're going forward at that speed and you hit the ground, you slide around, so you'll sort of slide through the environments like this. This gives the traversal of the game a pretty satisfying feel. Like, it's just fun to go from place to place, which I think is probably the minimum that you need in a game where most of what you're doing is simple platforming and stuff. You need the actual control of the character to feel good, and in this case it actually does. It's you feel somewhat weighty but not awkward, and this just means that the inertia that you get from boosting around the air and stuff feels satisfying to steer around. As for the story, well, if you want to just skip to my conclusions, then go to this time. Otherwise, I'm going to be talking some spoilers about the story, starting now. So the story here is a very human story about terraforming. This moon, Europa, was terraformed by humans in the sort of distant past. And the bots that were sent sort of developed sentience, and they became more than just like a simple terraforming AI, and actually created an entire civilization here, basically, while humans were waiting for the terraforming to end and then to come themselves. So when humans got here, they found a beautiful moon that was terraformed successfully for them to live on, but it also had a whole civilization of these things called gardeners, these sort of sentient AI that had created their own home here. And humans tried to live in harmony with these gardeners, but humans did the thing that humans do and started exploiting the moon for its resources, and the gardeners didn't like that very much, and an actual war happened. You see, in this game you play as a little boy, and when you first start the game, you'll notice that he has one robotic eye. It's drawn attention to right from the start, so it's not like a secret or anything. He has a sort of an aperture for an eye. And this journal that you're following all throughout the game is through the eyes of your father, who was here when all of this war stuff happened, and is sort of hoping for a better world for you. But of course you'll notice as you're going through the game that all this stuff looks really old. For your father to have been a part of this, it seems like it was an awful long time ago, and yet you're still a child. And it turns out at the end what actually happened was the child that you used to be was killed in the war. And as sort of you were trying to be nice to the machines, and well, you got hit by a stray bullet and died. However, your father sort of rejiggered you Dr. Light style and made you into a full robot effectively, so you're kind of biomechanical, but you are alive and you're sort of learning in this world. After you were made into this sort of machine hybrid, you were put into stasis for a while, and it turns out all of this happened a really, really long time ago, probably several hundred years ago, and it's just kind of you now. So you're seeing the aftermath of what is now basically an ancient war that you were technically a part of, but the you that was a part of it was a very different person a very long time ago. And in the end, you find a big bunch of stasis pods with a whole bunch of humanity that's still there. So the whole generation of humanity waiting to be unsealed and repopulate the moon. And the ending kind of makes it seem like you have a choice as to whether you wake them up or not, but instead that choice is made for you by the character you're playing, and he decides to actually wake them all up, to give humanity a second chance on this moon, and hope that this time things might go a little bit better, especially with him around as a sort of intermediary between the machines and the humans, being that he's both. So it's a pretty touching story, and it's also a story that hits on a lot of things we've seen before, even in Ghibli films and stuff, but it also, I think, is told relatively well in a way that's not trying to have like a big crazy twist or anything like that, but instead is pretty straightforward and is just trying to tell you the story. Like, in very simple means. It's a human story. It's something that I think we can all relate to in different ways because it touches on things that we all know and things that we've all seen, but with a fun sci-fi bend involving terraforming a distant moon. It is a pretty short adventure, as games like this often tend to be. My full playthrough of it took me 3.5 hours, and I found almost all of the emeralds. I missed like 5 or so I'll have to go back and get those. But I would say that it is worth playing because it is a nice story, nicely presented, with a beautiful presentation, and competent, if Spartan, game design that lends itself to simple puzzle solving and platforming that is enjoyable to do because of the responsive controls and physics and stuff. So yeah, I think Europa is a pretty memorable time with a nice message and a very good presentation. So I'll put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page for Europa if you guys wish to check it out yourselves. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.